Friends, I'm increasingly asked this question about what can persons do uh, with respect to vaccine mandates by private employers. And I've had some government officials who are pondering that question. I've had my counterparts in other states pondering that question. And so I want to take a crack at helping us think through that a bit, according to the things I've already said, namely that we have to start with fundamental principles in moments like this, and then think our way forward from those fundamental principles to the present situation and a solution. So I want to try my hand at that, and I hope you will find that as helpful. In the previous videos, I've stated that we have three fundamental rights at common law. Meaning by that, they don't come from government, they don't come from a judicial decision, they actually really come from God. That is a right to personal security, which is the right to life, to bodily integrity, to the safety and security of my limbs and my body and my reputation as a person, to liberty and to property. And the founding fathers had an understanding of what each of those terms meant. Now, in the context of these vaccines and mandates by private employers, we run into two of those in particular, that of personal security and liberty. From the standpoint of the person being vaccinated, I have a right to personal security. It's not just personal security against actions by the government, but from other persons. And the government has a duty to protect my personal security from actions by other persons, which is why we have laws against slander and assault and battery and so on and so forth. And so that would apply here. The government should protect me from having my bodily integrity violated by a vaccine that I have not chosen to take. At the same time, I also have liberty. I have a liberty to move about. I have a liberty to provide for myself by the creation of, for example, property, which would include to work, to make a living. That also, of course, supports my life. At the same time, the employer has his rights to his property and to his own liberty. And so the employer says, well, if you want to work for me and work on my property, then you have to have a vaccine. This is good for my business because it keeps employees from getting sick, shutting down my operations, and costing me money. So how do we balance those competing fundamental rights? Well, this is how I began to think through it today. One of the things that's altered the equation here between the employer and the employee is the change in liability laws. You see, we abrogated the common law concept of personal responsibility on behalf of an employer to not do something that he knows or reasonably knows should cause injury to another person, to be negligent in making a decision. And we've said instead, so employee, if you're injured at the workplace, you don't have to prove the common law concepts of negligence, that the person should have been responsible, should have seen or foreseen this injury might occur. And instead, if you having to prove that now, you just have to prove that you were injured in the workplace, and you'll get damages. But you won't maybe get as much money as you would if a jury had decided, whoa, that was really bad, kind of thing, okay? So we abrogated the common law. Now, how that plays into this is in two ways. One, the federal government has eliminated liability on behalf of the manufacturers of these vaccines. Secondly, the workers' comp law really eliminates to some degree the responsibility of the employer to really look at the integrity of these vaccines and what they're doing and the consequences that may flow from them. And so the employer in some ways is really shielded from liability for taking a real strong, thorough, complete look at the vaccines and the consequences to him of mandating those vaccines. So here's what I would say. The liberty, as it was understood at common law, did not mean that I had a liberty to go to work for you, a liberty to make my living through you. Think back to what conservatives said about the Obamacare abortifacient mandate. We said you may have a right to an abortion, but you don't have a right to go work for Hobby Lobby. And if Hobby Lobby thinks abortifacients are immoral, violates their religious beliefs as Catholics, well, then go work somewhere else. Don't violate their rights. So we can't very well sit here and say, well, you have a liberty to go work for that company who's imposing a vaccine mandate. You have a liberty to earn your living there. Well, no, you really don't. But what makes the problem most severe is that employers really don't face the liability consequences they would otherwise face for making decisions that affect their employees. So what if we were to consider this? Removing the workers' compensation protection for employers, going back to the common law, and saying, look, Mr. Employer, you need to think about the effects of this vaccine and its integrity. And while nobody can sue the vaccine manufacturer, that's a problem in Washington, D.C. we can't address. You will be responsible for the damages to your employees that you could have foreseen had you really studied and examined all the material and information that's out there about vaccines. And then the employee can sit here and make the same examination and decide whether he or she wants to go to work for an employer that does or does not require a vaccine mandate. You see, when both sides have to be responsible for the decisions that they make and the damages that accrue to them, now we've created a playing field that's a little bit different. Right now, employers don't really have to thoroughly consider all the implications and all the research involving vaccinations, and they just simply want to make their businesses run, so here I'm going to require it of you. And a liability, well, there may be so few incidences, and because of workers' compensation, the damages will be so low that it's just not worth the potential of work stoppages or losing employees. I'm just going to mandate it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you see, when we get away from fundamental principles, and then we don't stop to consider where we've gotten away from them and how getting away from them may be affecting our ability to deal with the present situation, well, we may not reach right solutions. And I hope my analysis of this situation is helpful and encouraging, if not in this situation, for future situations that will undoubtedly arise. Thank you.